Today we're sharing with you a number of great ways that you can preserve the local tomato harvest. And one of them that we're going to do right now is crushed New Jersey plum tomatoes. So the plum tomatoes are what we like to use for canning. These are then great in sauces, soups, stews, just wonderful. And we use the plum tomatoes because they have so much more kind of meat to them, and they just work perfectly for this. So I'm going to show you the basic steps, and then you'll learn how to do a hot water bath canning as well, the process of that, which is not intimidating at all. What you do want to do is shop your local farmer's market or your local farmer. If you need to find out where they are, log on to www.NOFA-NJ.org and click on Eat Local Organic, and we've got a farm and food guide there, and you're going to find your local farmers and farms. It's August in New Jersey, so it is tomato time, and the tomatoes are out there in full force. You want to choose beautiful, vine-ripened, organic plum tomatoes. There's lots of different varieties. San Marzano, I believe this might be an Amish paste tomato, but what you want to do is get dead ripe ones. The first step in the process, once you have your tomatoes and you brought them home, you've washed them, to get ready to make these crushed tomatoes, score the ends, and this is the blossom end of the tomato, with a serrated knife, nice little score in the bottom. So that's what you're doing to get them ready for the next step. Now we've got our plum tomatoes all scored and ready to go in the boiling water. So we're going to plop those all right in at the same time. Just kind of wait for the skin to kind of split a little bit. If they're really nice dead ripe tomatoes, which they should be if you're taking the time to do this, it's going to happen really quickly. So you don't have to overthink it too much. I've got a cold water bath here, ice water in a bowl right next to my pot. So I'm going to pull these right out, just to kind of try to get them all out and into that ice water bath. So that is step 2 on our crushed plum tomatoes. Delicious. So now that we have blanched our tomatoes and we scored them, blanched them, put them in our ice water bath, we really have these skins that peel off just like that. So tremendously easy when you've got nice ripe tomatoes. So we're going to quarter them next after this, and then just very lightly crush them. Oh, look at that color. That's like amazing. It almost looks purple, right? It's so beautiful. It's just an exciting time of year, going to the farmer's market and seeing all these beautiful tomatoes. Great heirlooms. We're going to do something next with our heirlooms, but this particular recipe, when you're canning tomatoes, I really find you want to use nice, firm tomatoes. The heirlooms that are so tempting, enjoy them fresh while they're around. And then I'm going to show you a great way later on. We have a great recipe as well for those heirlooms to infuse that flavor into a really amazingly delicious carbonated beverage that I know you're going to love. So anyway, back to these plums now. We've got these ready, and 2 ways you can do this. If you don't like to use your hands as much, you can just quarter these tomatoes. The other thing you can do, which I love doing, is just rip them apart with your hands. Just like, And you want all those nice juices and seeds in there because they have a lot of flavor. So you want that. I love to just rip them right apart and crush them right into the pot. That's what we're doing anyway. So once you have some of those done, the next thing you want to do is, if you've got a potato masher, I think this is a great tool to use. Mash up some of these in the bottom of your pot. If you're doing our recipe here is 12 to 13 pounds, and that should make exactly 5 32-ounce quarts. 5 jars is just about the right amount to fit in a hot water bath can or 2. So that's like perfect. So get 12 to 13 pounds of ripe tomatoes for this. So we're mashing these up, a little bit of them, not all of them. We do want nice chunky tomatoes because if you're making a sauce and you want some nice texture and you want to make sure you maintain nice texture in your tomatoes, we're going to put this on the stove to heat. And what's going to happen is just kind of, we've got these juices going now with the few crushed ones in there that we've mashed with our potato masher. We'll add all the others in there and they're just going to break right down in the heat. Not too much again. You want to have some nice texture, but you want everything to get hot. Meanwhile, I have preheated the oven just to 225 and we have clean 32-ounce wide mouth canning jars in the oven, okay, that are getting ready for this delicious crushed tomato stuff. And then we'll move on to our next step, which is just really to get our clean canning jars out of the oven, set up next to our stove with our equipment. I'm going to go through next with you all the equipment that you want to have ready. And it's not a lot. Don't be intimidated, right? I'm going to go through it, but it's just like 4 or 5 things. And you'll be happy that you have them. So, okay, we'll go on to our next step. Now we're actually ready to get our hot jars out of the oven. We have the oven at 225, so it doesn't need to be super, super hot. But again, you want to make sure you're not putting hot tomatoes into cold jars and then into a hot water bath canner, because then you can have thermal shock. And it's actually, this is the way you should do it. We've got our jars. I know I said 5, right? I have 10 in here. I don't know why. Okay, we'll use 5 of them for the 12 pounds of tomatoes that we did. These are wide mouth 32-ounce ball mason jars. I highly recommend that that's what you use. Buy clean, fresh jars. Yes, they can be reused. However, you cannot reuse the inside rings with the flange for the seal. So you always have to buy boxes of clean, fresh, new ones of these. You can reuse the outer rings, okay? And that's fine as long as they're not rusted or something. So then you need a hot water bath canner, which super inexpensive to get one of these. And I think you'd be really happy if you do that, if you're into canning tomatoes. You'll need a jar lifter, a wide mouth funnel, and a ladle. And that's pretty much it. So it's not a lot of stuff. So we've got our tomatoes on the stove now, and they're foaming. They're hot. So they look good and they're ready to be packed. Now, one thing that's really important to know about tomatoes and hot water bath canning. Tomatoes are fruit, but they're not a high acid fruit. Their acidity level is just about like 4.6, so it's borderline. So it's really important for safety purposes that you add some citric acid into your canning jars so that it helps take the acid level up to make it safe for hot water bath canning. So if you do that, you're going to be fine, and don't worry about the safety issue. If you get that, you want a half teaspoon of citric acid for a 32-ounce jar. And citric acid is a naturally occurring enzyme in fruits like citrus, right? Lemons, limes, some other things too, but that's what that is. And I like to add, we really like to add a teaspoon of salt in here too. If you're going to be using your tomatoes for soups and sauces and things, you're going to be glad that you've added a little seasoning in here. So we're doing a half teaspoon of the citric acid. And again, the recipes will be on the NOFA site. And I'm going to put a teaspoon of salt in each one. I'm going to put my jars actually right here next to my pot on the stove. Because when you're dealing with hot things, you want to keep them arranged in a fashion that is safe and you don't have to transport too much. This is why I've got a wide mouth funnel, because it fits right on top and inside that wide mouth jar. I've got my hot tomatoes. They're simmering and foaming and ready to go in. So we're going to go ahead and fill our jars. Meanwhile, I can hear my hot water bath canner over here coming up to temp, which is great. And I think I may have mentioned that the 12 to 13 pounds of tomatoes is just about exactly the right amount for 5 32-ounce jars that will fit in your canner. Let me just show you. You want to fill up to that bottom thread line. You don't want to overpack, leaving almost an inch headspace there. These jars of tomatoes will keep for several months, so you can really enjoy these Jersey plum tomatoes throughout the year. Okay, I look like I almost have just like the perfect amount for 5 jars. The other part of the hot water bath canner over here is your basket. I'm going to show that to you in a second. But that's a part that usually comes right with your hot water bath canner. You do want the basket, and you see I've got it in the up position as I'm heating it. We might have a little bit left over, and that's cool. I'm probably just gonna save that and cook it down with some caramelized onions and carrots and make a little nice marinara for dinner tonight. Okay, we got all 5 jars filled. Little tomatoes left, which is great. The next thing you want to do, which you see these are the flat lids. The inside ones I was telling you that you need to make sure that you have fresh new ones every time, because there's a plastic flange, that seal, that needs to, once it's used, it's gone. So you have to redo those. But what I want to do is cover these with some hot water, but just to kind of prep the plastic on the seal of these canning lids. Whoop. Soften them. There we go. Okay. Awesome. Okay. Now I got to grab my basket back here. Oh, trick to the basket. Gets really hot in here. If there's any juice that happened to get on the rim of these jars, we want to clean that off, because if it's there, it'll caramelize and then the seal might not work. So I'm just wiping this off. By the way, if you're thinking, do I have to sterilize the jars? You don't. You want to start with clean jars, but because we're going to process these for over 30 minutes, we're going to process them actually this size for 45 minutes in hot water, you don't have to worry about sterilizing. What you don't want to do is scrape the inside surface, though, of your lid, okay? Use the tongs carefully to grab them out of the water. All right, now we've got our outside rings that go on. Putting these on, you don't have to wrench that tightly. Just put it on what they call like finger tight. You're going to get a vacuum seal on these jars. This isn't really sealing the jar. This is holding that flat lid in place. So now that we have our plum tomatoes in the jars and the rings in place, and again, you don't have to wrench them on tightly, the hot water process is actually going to seal the jars. You're gonna get a vacuum seal. Load them in carefully, going up and down, straight up and down, and across from each other, so that you don't have the weight on one side, then your whole tray is gonna pitch to one side and drop into the canner. So I'm gonna lower this now in. And now you want your water to cover the jars. And we had this boiling a little bit. This will happen to you sometimes. So some of the water's boiled away. So I'm gonna add some water in, because I want the water to be at least an inch above the lids of these jars. You need to bring your water back to a boil before you start counting your processing time. And then we're gonna count 45 minutes to process the 32-ounce quart jars of the plum tomatoes. And once they're done, you're gonna turn off the heat. You're gonna let them rest a little bit. You're gonna pull up your basket just like the way we put it in, but you're gonna pull it up and let them sit and cool a little bit. And then you're gonna have a finished product that's beautiful and delicious, just like this. And it's gonna stay on your shelves really nicely for several months. And it's gonna be a great basis for sauces, soups, stews. You're gonna really enjoy it throughout the winter months. So, Jersey tomatoes.